Okay, this week we know that the real estate figures came out again, which a lot of New Zealanders follow quite avidly these days, I have to say. And it noted again that average house prices were well off their COVID peaks, and some of those areas in particular that were identified were Auckland, our largest city. What, 1.5 million people living there or something now? Maybe probably more. I think I remember rightly that a city the size of Timaru, or no, a population the size of Timaru, arrives in Auckland every year, either from international or internal migration. Anyhow, huge city, got its own council, doing its own thing. And one of those leaders of Auckland City Council is former Member of Parliament for Tauranga, in actual fact, Simon Bridges, former National Party leader and former leader of the opposition, I think from 2018 to 2020 from memory, before the National Party went mad. But anyhow, he has taken, though, a role as chief executive of the business chamber there, the old what they call Chamber of Commerce. And last week he said that the government need to do something urgently to stir up what he quote unquote the animal spirits of the economy, and that they should intervene a little bit more and be a wee bit more supportive and start provoking a bit more change and in particular economic growth. Um, Simon Bridges joins us now. Simon, welcome to the show. Lovely to have you on. Lovely to catch up with you.
G'day, Michael. Hey, really good to be on with you. And I'm here to help. Auckland's population, not to the person, 1.75 million. So there you go.
1.75,
Actually, quite big
God.
in, yeah,
Yeah.
quite big in Western terms. Not big by sort of Chinese city standards or emerging world, but that would be, I think I'm right to say, the fifth largest city. I know it seems hard to believe, but in the United States. Because a lot of their cities, if you're talking strict metropolitan areas, so it's not a small city, and in New Zealand terms, very big because of course 1.75 in a country of what 5.2.
Yeah, no, it's amazing. 1.75, wow. And you're growing all the time. Listen, and you're obviously in a bit of a funk, aren't you? Because as a city, and as a business, because when Simon Bridges comes from a free market perspective, as you are, both in terms of your philosophy and in terms of your political leanings, and start saying it's
Mm.
time for the government to intervene, something's going wrong. What's
Yeah.
going wrong in Auckland?
Well, you were mentioning the property prices. I haven't got the numbers there, but as it's gone backwards in New Zealand. It's gone backwards by a lot more in Auckland. The figure that prompted my kind of reaction, and I was reacting to in some media, was 6.2% unemployment, again considerably higher than other parts of New Zealand. I could rattle off statistics, but I mean, I was just looking at some in the last day or three around hotel occupancy, abysmal, much worse than around the rest of New Zealand, and that's also a sense that you've got probably too many hotels, but in any event,
Mm.
and I think you say what's going on. Hey, I'll acknowledge, and it's great that we have some good things happening in New Zealand. We've got an official cash rate. It's too slowly, in my view, and not by enough, but coming down. We've got a farmer export led recovery kind of happening, but Auckland's a bit different. It dances to its own beat, and what you've got up here is sentiment very poor. And just no cash rolling around really, and if it was a business, it would have serious cash flow problems. And so what I was saying is, hey, you know what, government, and you're right, I am basically a free marketeer, but in this situation, we've been in pain for now probably actually several years. You might sit there and say, well, several more months, what's the problem? But how much better will it be? I think it needs a bit of help. It needs a bit of stimulation to get that cash flow rolling around. And I'm no monopoly on the ideas, but I put out a few ideas.
No, okay. Well, let's go on those ideas, shall we? Because I'm interested in what levers you think a government can push or pull to
Yeah.
stimulate the economy, full stop, but in Auckland in general.
Yeah. Well, firstly, let me just say, once upon a time, like you, Michael, I was a member of parliament, and it's a brilliant thing being a member of parliament. You have armies of researchers, and I don't have much of that anymore. So this is world according to Simon, and frankly, the government sits there with hundreds of smart young things in the beehive who could help them with probably a better plan, if you like, than I'm going to give you. But here's a few starters. How about significantly liberalise the tourism visa? Look, I can tell you, around Asia at the moment, there is a tourism boom. Countries like Malaysia, Vietnam, there are others, if I think long and hard about it, are experiencing more tourists from other parts of Asia than they've ever seen before.
Hmm.
Australia's basically back. We're not remotely back to where we were pre-COVID. So how about we get onto some of the tools we've got? Some people don't like tourism. They say it fills up cities. It's bad for infrastructure. I sit there and say, beggars can't be choosers.
Mm.
We're not too rich to say we don't need the cash flow here at this time. You could do fundamentally the same thing around international students. Again, that was don't quote me to the exact, number, but something like $5.5 billion, $6 billion in revenue pre-COVID. Now
Yeah.
we're still sitting at around, I want to say 2.5, 3. Auckland needs those people and that cash rolling around. Major events. I'll give you another, figure. Um, when I was Minister of Economic Development and we had a major events fund and council would chip in, we spent about $30 million between us in Auckland on events and activations. And you may say, well, what good is that? But look, we know when you've got a Taylor Smith or you've got a Swift or you've got a
America's
big
Cup.
sports, America's Cup, you see the money rolling around and you
Yeah.
get people from offshore and into regions. So it has a real effect. Well, that 30 million, what was 30 million over the last several years, it's down to, I think it's around 7 to 10 million. And by the way, if Wayne Brown doesn't get his bed tax, I think he's talking about it being more like 3 million. So that's dried up. And I'm hearing from the likes of ASB Tennis Centre, they want to put a roof on. It's peanuts, the money they want and need from government. Eden Park, I declare I'm on the board of that, by the way. But, some of the things they're doing, this is stuff that in the scheme of government spending around areas, but I think they would get some confidence up. They would see a bit of money flowing around. You can make a real difference. I've also gone with a big kahuna, and that accords with my philosophy of life. I'll acknowledge that, but I personally think there is a really strong case, or there is certainly a case at the current time for something like corporate tax cut relief. Because I just think, that does stir, as you said, the animal spirits. Other countries have, people say, well, we'll lose revenue. Yeah, look, at a government level, that's true. But I think we're talking pros, cons here. And I'd rather see, in a situation where we've got much lower public debt than a lot of the West, us doing something like that. And go talk to Ireland. They've done serious corporate tax relief over years, and now
Yeah.
they've got so much money they don't know what to do with it. I mean, others, New Zealand Taxpayers Union, have talked about full capital expensing as an alternative. But I suppose I come back to it. Where's
Okay.
the
I mean,
stuff
no,
to
no, no.
kind of
That's so okay. Unfortunately, we're in as ironically today, we talk about former ministers not turning up to COVID inquiries and things like that, but as a consequence of the COVID response, and Treasury are now saying we spent way too much money and now we've got to pull our belt in. I mean, that makes it difficult for a government that's seeking to maximise the effectiveness of every dollar and saying, listen, we don't have the money to spend on them, sorry, because it's been spent already, and we're having to deal with that. It makes it difficult for a government to do the last bit in particular, doesn't it? To, in actual fact, to
yeah.
sue revenue when really you don't have enough, and you are trying to pare back aspects of the state.
Look, I get and respect that a level, but if you were a business, and I know the country and a government isn't exactly a business. Look, this is kind of wind down, right? Sometimes you do have to invest to make it, but I fully respect what Nicola Willis has been doing around, as you say, paring it back. There's been literally, as you know as well as me, billions of dollars wasted
Yeah.
in this country by the public purse and the public from the public purse. But this, I think, is different. This is out there. I think we sometimes lose the big picture. We're saving the government's books in a narrow sense, but we've got an economy we need to save. And I said before, it's pros and cons, right? We've seen, and I think it's probably the biggest kind of rough indicator of our economic health, we've seen more Kiwis leave New Zealand last year than I think we've possibly
Yeah,
ever seen, certainly in
yeah,
a very
and
long
and
time,
and the kind of
right?
Kiwis, Simon, that we need. I mean, for God's sake.
Correct. And so,
Mm.
so I sit there and say, kind of, we got to get serious. The short term we're in really matters. Public debt definitely matters. We could talk about that for a long time, but just remember this. America, and I know America's different and it sets the standard for the world and all these things, it's sitting at, I think, 130% public debt. Much of Europe is well over 100% public debt. New Zealand currently, it will peak out around the
So
40s, I
is your
think. So
concern therefore that, because it's the Chris Hitkins argument at the end of the day, he's saying, well, this is traditional Keynesian economics. When things are poor, you stimulate the economy, and when they're good, you pare it back a bit. Are you suggesting that this is time for a proper economic stimulus package from the government?